Sowing the Seed series. Story 7. Jesus says goodbye and goes home. Taken from Acts chapter 1, verses 4 through 12. In the weeks leading up to his crucifixion, Jesus told his disciples repeatedly what would happen to him. However, it appears that only Mary of Bethany really understood. She anointed Jesus in preparation for his burial a week before his death. Can you imagine the shock? Was Jesus really dead? They would never forget the awful sight of the crucifixion. Was it really over? Had it really been Jesus on the cross? He was unrecognizable. Then it was over. What were the disciples to do now? Locked in a room somewhere in Jerusalem, they waited. How could this have happened? Judas had betrayed Jesus, then committed suicide. Peter had followed Jesus that night, but later denied he even knew who Jesus was. All of them had deserted Jesus and run away, all except perhaps John. Then a man named Joseph had gone to Pilate and gotten permission to bury Jesus in his family tomb. Some of the women had prepared spices to give Jesus a proper burial. But now soldiers guarded the tomb. What could they do? They waited. 2 days. Then the Sabbath. They waited. Early Sunday morning, a few of the women decided to go to the tomb, but returned with wild stories. No soldiers, no body, an empty tomb. They said they saw angels. They said they saw Jesus. Crazy. Peter and John left to go to the tomb. What could have happened? 2 disciples left for the city of Emmaus. Later that night they came back. They claimed they saw Jesus too. They just did not recognize him at first. What could have happened? Suddenly Jesus himself steps into the room. He is alive. Can you imagine their joy? This story takes place 40 days later. All of the disciples had seen Jesus, not just the 11. Hundreds of his followers, not once, but many times, in many places. It had been weeks. What now? Jesus took his 11 disciples to the top of the Mount of Olives. The disciples all remembered what happened the last time they were there. What an exciting day that was. Thousands of people, all crying out, "Hosanna! Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord." Could this be the time they had waited for? And when Jesus had gathered his 11 disciples around him, he said to them, "Do not leave Jerusalem. Wait for the one the Father promised to send to you, the one I told you about. For John baptized you with water, but you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit not many days from now." And while they were all together, the disciples asked Jesus, "Lord, are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel now?" Jesus answered them and said, "It is not necessary for you to understand the time, that fixed season which the Father has already determined by his own authority. But you will receive authority when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses unto death, in Jerusalem, throughout Judea and Samaria, and even to the ends of the earth." And when Jesus finished saying these things, while the disciples watched, Jesus was taken up into the heavens, until a cloud took him out of their sight. And while the disciples continued to watch intently as Jesus was taken away, 2 men appeared before them dressed in white. And the messenger said to them, "Men of Galilee, why do you keep staring up at the heavens? This same Jesus who has been taken away from you into heaven will return the same way he left." So the disciples went back down the Mount of Olives and returned to Jerusalem. Sowing the Seed Series, Story 7. Jesus says goodbye and goes home. Taken from Acts chapter 1, verses 4 to 12.